What's up? I'm doing yet another run on Demon Turf, and I'm hoping this will be the one. I got to floor 50 last time, and then went through the door and went back to the hub area. There's someone like yelling outside. I hate how noisy people can be around here. Um, I forgot what I was gonna say. Oh yeah, I added Fabraz, and apparently that was a bug that was known, and now it should be fixed. But I'll probably try to avoid that door just in case. Um, I tried for like an hour and a half to get this GameCube style controller working with the glide and hookshot powers, but it would not work. And then all of a sudden, Steam just decided that it can't detect it at all out of nowhere. Um, but it might have been for the best, to be honest, because I realize now that they are like the GameCube style controller for the Switch. Sounds like it works for Steam, and that controller seems a lot better because it has buttons that the controller we had didn't, like the LB button and like a select button and stuff like that. So yeah, I think we actually might have one of those at our folks' place already. But if we can't find it, we can always buy a new one. So yeah, I'm just gonna use the Xbox 360 controller again, and here goes nothing. Gonna listen to more System Speaks and hope that I beat it tonight. I think I'm on this one.
Okay, so this is Sasha, and I want to talk to you about this conference because we're at a conference for the whole weekend. I'm not talking about Dr. E presenting or that part of things, or even like her perspective on what they're talking about. I want to talk to you about what I heard because, first of all, I heard stuff. Like, I could pay attention. Like, I couldn't pay attention in the beginning, but then I realized we had the notebook, and that's what got my attention. And I'm completely in love with our notebook. Like, I am going to marry our notebook, okay? So, I mean, like, the stuff that I learned from the notebook is so helpful and so good. Not good, like, pleasant, but good, like, informative that I just need to pay attention. And so I saw the notebook and I was like, I saw me writing in the notebook, except it wasn't me writing in the notebook. Like, I know that sounds crazy, so I don't know how to explain it. Like, it was like, okay, first of all, my head hurts really bad right here. Ugh. But also, it was like I saw the notebook from far, far away. But the more I concentrated on the notebook, the closer I could get to it. Like I was swimming or something. I don't even know. And then when I realized that we were listening to a speaker, I was trying to pay attention to the speaker, but then it was like the
Nope.
darkness of this circle around my peripheral vision would just narrow in and get smaller and smaller until like I couldn't see and I was far away again, and then like further and further away. So then I had to focus on the notebook and I could come in, like zooming in. So like I spent the morning playing some kind of new trick that I have not done before and don't know how it works or even if it's beneficial like to anyone besides myself. It was like I have new powers that are like zoom in, zoom out. I don't know how else to explain it. But because we were learning stuff, it was a good time to practice because we had the notebook. Some lady was talking about DID and I could pay attention and almost get it. And then when something was too hard, it was like when the husband talks and I'm like, wait, you just said something really important and it all slipped past me faster than I could hear it. Like I know that you were talking and I know you were talking to me, but like it didn't. It went through my brain like liquid through my brain. Like it did not stick at all. I have zero comprehension of what you just said. So some of what she said was like that. And I don't know like all the clinical stuff the way Dr. E does. So like she's going to have to do her own thing with that. And I know she's working on that for the plural conference coming up. I'm just talking about my perspective of things. Like my mind is so blown. I need to process. And so because I am trying not to text the therapist 800 things a day, and we already texted her of, oh my goodness, we're at this conference, what is happening? I need to not text her anymore. So we are back to the podcast because I have got to process what's just happened. So item 1 on the agenda, zoom in, zoom out. What is that? What is this thing where I can focus on the notebook and all of a sudden like it pulls me out front? But it's still not me writing, although a couple times I could get there like all the way so that it was me listening and it was me writing, but most of the time it was not. But I was still aware of what was happening and I could still listen. But I couldn't stay very well, and sometimes she would get either too clinical or too trauma-ish. And so like I was like, oh, and I'm lost. And it was like a slip and slide. Like I was out of there. And I didn't even mean to be out of there. Like how do you control that so you can stay? And can you really stay when there's someone else there? And how does that work? Like, I don't know, but I need these skills because I really do want to get better. And I really do want to like be healthy or something. Like I want to function. I don't even know how to explain it. I don't know what I want. I want to not be crazy, and I want to be helpful, and I want to be able to control myself. Like do adultish things. Well, hello. Like I don't mean like adultish things. I mean like be an adult or be in the environment where I'm supposed to be. And like be there because I choose to be there, not because something triggered me out and I got stuck, or not missing out because someone else got triggered out and got stuck. Like, you know what I mean? So I don't know how it works, but I learned something today or experienced something today that I don't know what the word for it is, and I don't know how to make it happen again, and I don't know if I can do it in any other setting besides whatever happened this morning. But it was bizarre. And I don't know how to explain it more than like this zooming in and zooming out. I don't know. I am now a telescope. A microscope? I don't even know. Like, what was that? It made me all like foggy and a little bit nauseous and definitely headache-ish. I'm not sure it made me any smarter, but I knew something was going on and I knew something happened, and now I want to talk about it. So here I am. So here's some of the things that I learned about this morning. This is not like a clinical presentation. This is not DID knowledge and gonna teach y'all how to do anything important. It is not that. This is my response to what I took notes on, that what I learned, because that's where I could do the zoom in, zoom out thing. These were the things that were getting my attention, and so I want to talk about them. Okay, so one of the things that she talked about in the very beginning was about previous therapy experiences, that even when someone was really lousy at treating DID, that you can still find the good in what they did right that was stabilizing for you. So I'm not talking about creepers who are straight out abusive. I'm just talking about people who are like, okay, I'm really glad you helped me right now, but you no longer know what you're doing, and so I am out of here. So she was saying that doing this can be like really helpful in crisis, even when they were not helpful in trauma, or in helpful in learning what you need for therapy. Like maybe some people who get a diagnosis and then go to a different therapist or are referred to a different therapist, and that kind of thing. Like there are reasons that even though it's a bad therapy match, that it can be good for you, and looking at what is good is helpful and empowering instead of only being stuck with your now time therapist who actually is good at DID, but you're afraid to trust them, not because of anything with them, but because of everything before. And so this caught my attention and was one of the times where I had this whole zoom in experience, because I wanted to hear what she was saying about that, because I think this is something that like we are dealing with. Like, we adore our therapist. She is rock star awesome and rock star solid, both of which matter. Like, that's a good connection and it's a good therapy and we've got it. But at the same time, for all kinds of reasons, not just bad therapy. I know there's more to it than that, even though I don't know what there's more to it than that. But I know that, like, part of the problem is because we've had bad therapy experiences. But what she's saying is that even that does not have to control you in now time. She didn't say now time. Our system knows it now time and what that means, and that helps me. So, like, I could apply it to now time. But so she didn't use the phrase now time, but I could apply it to that and understand it. So, like, it made me think back because I can think of 2 therapists, maybe 3. No, 2. I can think of 2 therapists that we had, like the very first one from the college, and then the one that had an affair with our partner. Those 2 were just straight up dangerous. Like, what they did was absolutely not okay. It was not helpful. Although, even that is hard because the second one got us away from that partner. Like, she can have her. She was not good for us. And so, like, that was a good thing, right? So, look, see, I can even do it with that. I thought these were the 2 I couldn't do it with, and now I'm doing it. Because the very first one at the college at least got us to the therapist who diagnosed us. Oh my goodness, I have to rethink this whole thing. Okay, so, oh my goodness, my brain is blown again. Okay, here's the thing. So our therapist now is cool. It would be cool if we actually participated in therapy, but she's cool and she's ready as soon as we are. Like, a year later, she's still ready any second now when we are ready. But I can think of the therapist that we had before. That was really hard, but I don't think she was an unsafe person, although there were unsafe things that happened that were triggers for us. And, like, common sense things of, like, why did you do that? What were you thinking? But not necessarily like we were in danger. So it wasn't that kind of bad experience. But even that was not because she was bad. She's just really good at a specific kind of client and really good at doing that, which is totally fine. But she went way outside of that to work with us, and that was not a good idea. That's all that happened there. The things that she did with us and the things that she did in therapy with us or didn't do in therapy with us would have been fine if we had normal kid issues, not trauma issues, and not as an adult. It wouldn't have been a big deal. But because we were an adult and because there were trauma issues involved, she should not have been working with us. That's all that is. So hers was like a limitation of her skills, not she's an evil person, right? So I can see that. But then if I go back to the therapist before that, which was like 15 years ago or 20 years ago or something, that therapist was kind of helpful, but he and his wife were in all of our sessions. Like, both of them were there. And the problem with that was, first of all, I don't know why they were both in our sessions. That was kind of weird, come to think of it. Like, I never thought about it being weird until this minute, but that was weird. I don't know. I can't. I'm going to zoom out. Now, see, I've got a whole new lingo now because this is what happened to me this morning. So I'm just going to zoom out of that and, like, back off because I don't even want to go there. I don't know what that was about. But the problem became that because we were going to therapy with them and they were both there, then they, like, started fighting in our sessions and ultimately got divorced. And so we didn't have therapists anymore because they were fighting over who got to keep which clients. Okay, can I just say re-traumatizing? Like, we are children of divorced parents. And even if we don't want to live with either parent, I don't need my therapist fighting over me or my therapist not wanting me. Like, it was just bad. So that was a whole different kind of not good. Not good. But what it did, if I'm trying to do what she said about connecting to what was good or stabilizing about it, what was good was when they fell apart, I realized that even though I was a young adult, like we were maybe, I don't know, 20 or 18 or something, what I realized was that even though we were barely an adult, we were functioning better than those two were. And so we didn't go to therapy for another 15 years because we were way better functioning than those two people were. That is what we learned about that. So that was the good there, which like helps me just, okay, I can just let go of that because it's settled, right? So those two pieces, the one therapist that was just outside of her realm of what she is able to do, and the other ones that were just like, no, you two need to like go work this out amongst yourselves. Those issues were not about us. Like, I can hold that in my head. I know that's true. It took me a long time to realize it, but we're there now. Like, if I had a box at the therapist's office, which, first of all, is hilarious because we already have, like, so many notebooks there. But if I had a box at the therapist's office and, like, wrote on note cards of when like a particular issue was actually finished, like we have completely worked through this issue, it is closed, it is finished, we don't need to readdress it. And I don't mean like denial, I mean like legit, I'm okay with this and where it's at and it's closed. I could put both of those therapists in that box. Like, I'm okay with it, I get it, I've worked really hard through it and through some layers of it, and we're good. Okay? But the other two therapists that I could think of that I was like, there's no way there's anything good.
I hit the wrong button.
The one who had an affair with our partner, and the one from the college that like was so terrible and disclosed everything about us and our system to the entire faculty of our college. So like I was like, there's no good in them. But as soon as I talked about it a minute ago, like what I realized was I'm just mad about it. It's not that there was no good in it. It's that I'm mad. I am mad at those two people. She should not have had an affair with our partner, and the other one should not have sent all of that. So those are like two betrayals, right? I learned that this morning. It's called betrayals, and it's a betrayal trauma, and it can cause shame, and it can also cause disruption in attachment or something like that, and rupture in the therapeutic process. Okay, so that ruptured me all over the place, both of those experiences. And I thought, those are the only two I can't find any good about. But as soon as I tried to start talking about it, I totally realized there was good. Because the first one at the college, at least we got away from that college. And the second one, we got away from that partner who was an alcoholic and not good for us. Like, it was to a seriously abusive level. Like, yeah, that was bad. It was really bad. So this is what I realized as I started talking about it. That, dang it, she's right. Because if I realize what was good about it, then that connects it and I can kind of let it go. I think there's some more layers on those two that different insiders need to like maybe talk about or write about and process a little bit. It's not finished. Like, I can't check it off and put it on the card and drop it in the box. Like, it's not done. So somebody's still carrying around like some of the layers or whatever, but at least there's a context for it now. And what I learned this morning is not just the context, but it means like that means there's a connection. Like, I shouldn't even know about this because this is way before I was even around. But I am connecting and I want this to be my new job, and that's what's happening. Like, zoom in, people, because I am paying attention and I am trying to connect some dots. And she said that that's actually what helps, is putting things into context, connecting like different insiders who know different pieces of those stories and communicating about what those pieces are, and then like processing or whatever that is, all with the therapist, right? So that's a huge piece. Another piece that she said at one point, and I don't even know the context because this was a zoom in, zoom out moment. Like, I got nothing but this one line. She said, sleeping and eating have to be priorities or else you're still functioning from an adapted state. I don't know what an adapted state is, but that can't be good. But I know we have issues with both. We have issues with eating and with sleeping. So our issues with sleeping have to do with like sometimes being afraid to sleep, and sometimes it's waking up for nightmares, and sometimes it's some littles who just won't go to bed. And I don't mean like they're playing and having fun. I mean like wandering the house or sitting outside the children's rooms like little creepers trying to make sure that they're safe, or like I don't know what all is going on. But like this body has got to be in bed at regular intervals because we cannot function. Since starting therapy a year ago with our therapist now, this one is getting better. It's not perfect yet, but it's so much better. So I get that it's progress. And then the other one about eating, oh, we have such eating issues. Like, I don't even know how to talk about it. It is not like we don't have an eating disorder. I don't mean like that. But the first problem is that when we were in the hospital with the baby for like 3 years, we didn't have any money, like no money, because all of our money was for keeping the baby alive and feeding the other children. And it was a really scary time. Like even our church had to give us food sometimes. Like it was a really scary time. But that's getting better, and we are catching up on her medical bills and things like that, and we're able to provide for ourselves differently. So like for the first time in 3 years, we have bought groceries every month for the last 4 months. Like that's how new it is that we have food in our house. Well, we had food storage, like dried food that we rehydrated or that the church gave us, that and we made sure the kids always had, but sometimes we had to let the kids eat and we didn't eat. So that is one layer of things, but that is slowly getting better. But the other thing is we had like food trauma from when we're little, which I don't want to go into right now, but it makes it hard to know that like you have permission to eat, and hard to know that like you should stop what you're doing because you're hungry and someone needs to go eat something. Does that make sense? I don't even know if that's a thing. But like literally even noticing that we're hungry, or doing the work of who's going to actually go get food and eat. And then there's also a layer of trauma, which I don't want to be super specific about, but where we were sometimes like had a psychotic mother, okay? And like sometimes we were given food that wasn't actually food. And I don't want to talk about that, and I'm not talking about any context other than the mother was not well. But then also there's a layer of like when they were little, like John Mark told me this. When they were little, they got to eat every 3 days like the chickens. What does that even mean? What am I supposed to do with that? I don't know what that means. Also, why do you only feed chickens every 3 days? That doesn't make sense either. So I don't even know what that means, or if that was a thing, and I don't want to like try to make it mean something it's not. So I'm just letting that hang out there until we fix it or work on it in therapy. Like I don't know, but it means John Mark's kind of in charge of making sure that we eat. And I don't know, it's hard. It's just a hard piece. We have lots of layers. And then the other layer of the food issue is that we have a serious gag reflex. And so there are some times, even when we're trying to eat, it won't go down. Like we just can't. And we've been cleared like medically, and so we know it's nothing like that. It's literally just psychological, and they told us to work on it in therapy. And at some times, and I don't know if it changes like who is out or what, or if there's certain littles close to the surface, then wow, I just said that. Is that a thing? Where did I learn that? Close to the surface. That's a phrase. That's like a specific phrase. I don't even know where I heard that. I had to hear that somewhere. Maybe Jane's show? I don't know. Someone must have said that in an interview or something, because I hadn't thought of that. But now I have a word for it. So I'm glad it came to me, but I don't know where it came from. But anyway, if there's certain littles close to the surface, then that gag reflex thing is worse. And so sometimes it's literally just hard to eat. And then when we had cancer and we're on chemo and that made us sick a lot anyway, that made that worse. So like it's a whole big swirl, tangled thing of we would just rather not have food ever. like ever, if we could survive, which is hilarious because we are not like a tiny person. I mean, we are, but we are the smallest person in the family. Like our biological family, they are large people, you guys. Large people. And I am not a tiny person. This body is not a tiny body. We play with the kids a lot. We walk a lot. We're doing more and more since we've come off the last round of chemo. Like physically, we're getting a lot better. And we have a lot of strength, like more than I realized we still had. So those are good things. But we are not a skinny
Yeah.
people, and we will never be a skinny people because that's just not our, like, besides any other health issues, like that's just not in our genetics. So it's not like we're in danger of wasting away. We eat enough, but sometimes it's literally like we had some rice today. And on a good day, maybe we can have some edamame with the rice. Maybe if we leave therapy in a really, really good place, we can drink some soup on the way home. Like, we are trying. But part of it is therapy, part of it is chemo, like all these different layers. Like, it's a tangled mess. And she's saying that, like, almost in a hierarchy of needs kind of thing, like that triangle or whatever, that the same way you have to work on safety in therapy before you can work on
Whoops.
other issues in therapy, you also have to work on eating and sleeping. And I'm like, crap, because we suck at both of those things, you guys. Like, what is that? We don't throw up our food on purpose. We don't make ourselves throw up. We don't starve ourselves on purpose of like, oh, I should be skinny and so I'm going to starve myself. Like, it's not an eating disorder in those kinds of ways, but there are so many triggers about eating and so many triggers about food. Maybe I think I'm using triggers correctly here, that food is just really hard and I don't know how to fix that easily. But I get and I hear that she's saying that we should. So I don't know, it's on the list now. Okay, and then the next thing that I wanted to say of my like own perspective or the zoom in, zoom out, one thing that zoomed me in so fast when I heard it was she was talking about like being a system of parts, like being a whole is made up of parts. And so it's not that the parts aren't real, and I guess by parts she means alters or personalities or insiders, whatever. She was using the words parts. And my friend Jane has talked about that. Like, she uses the word parts because she wants to remember that they are all parts of a whole and parts that are important together. So other people don't like to use parts because it sounds like so cold or something. I don't know, not cool or offensive to them or whatever. And like personalities or alters sound so clinical and not real, or so clinical and weird. The way she described parts actually makes me like that phrase better than the way I liked it before. Like, I understand it differently now. And what she was saying was, like, every one of the parts has a right to be there and a reason to be there and a purpose for being there. And that's why they are parts, because they are parts of the whole. But she also said something that made me really uncomfortable. And I don't know if it was uncomfortable because it was hard or if it was uncomfortable because it was wrong. Does that make sense? Like, I don't know. Like, I don't know if I agree with her or disagree with her, or if I just didn't like what she said. I don't know. But what she said was that people with DID have difficulty differentiating between thought and action, or in other words, between internal experience and external reality. So she is saying, like, what happens inside, it's not that it's not reality, but it's not external reality. That there's like an incongruence between what's happening inside and what's happening outside. And sometimes this shows up in like shame, for example, where you're like, oh, the therapist is going to fire me because I made a podcast. When in reality, the therapist is like, hey, cool, you made a podcast. Good job. That's an example. And so she's saying, but how that affects like parts or other insiders is that there's not an actual, like her example was a 3-year-old. She was saying there's not an actual 3-year-old. There's a representation of the 3-year-old that you once were. So, like, I don't think she was trying to be offensive. And if I'm looking for the evidence, like the therapist says, in most of, like, what this lady was saying, she was actually really sensitive and went out of her way to be careful about those kinds of things. So I don't think she was saying, like, oh, you fakers, you're not really real. Like, it's not that. Like, she talked about how they work together and all the different kinds of parts and all the different ways parts to work together and how parts can talk and all these things. So it's not like she was dismissing parts, but it was like what she said was so hard I couldn't hold on to it. Like, it slipped again. Like, when she talks, I'm like, your mouth is moving and I hear silence. How can my brain do that? Like, what you just said was really important, and I somehow skipped it, like on a record, like an old school vinyl, when it skips and you're like, I just missed a really cool piece of music. I have no idea what happened, but we're moving on. So, like, something like that happened while she was talking. So I'm not sure, but she was saying that there's a difference between recognizing the internal reality of a 3-year-old and something external. I don't even know. It was really hard, but it went back to, like, we're all part of a system and we are all part of a whole. And so she was like, we need adult parts to participate in therapy. Not that littles can't participate in therapy, but that part of taking care of littles is like internal self-care, not just other people taking care of you for you, but you learning to take care of yourself. And part of that is learning to tolerate therapy. Ugh. I don't even know what that means yet, and I'm already scared. Like, what does that mean, learning to tolerate therapy? And so, but that's what she was talking about, is that, like, if you're an adult part, you need to learn how to work together. So I automatically, right away, thought of Molly, who's like totally stepped up and helped with the littles on the inside. But then I was like, crap, I'm a slacker. I'm just talking about things on the podcast, but not actually. Like, I didn't go to therapy for a whole year. We were in therapy. I knew it, but I didn't talk to her. So how is that helpful? Well, it turns out that it's not helpful. Okay, so I confess that I have been not helpful, but I want to be helpful. And so how can I do that? Like, I want to step up and be cool. How can I help? Or what do I do? How do I go to therapy, actually participate, and try to stay present, even if someone else, like, how can I do that zoom in, zoom out thing if there are littles or someone else who's there? Like, I don't mean spy. I don't want to be intrusive. I don't want to be a creeper. I don't want to scare them. But if we're supposed to have someone who can stay present during therapy, like, the lights are on, people, pay attention, the therapist is talking to us, we need to soak this in. If we're supposed to have an adult part who can stay present, know that we're in therapy, and, like, hold on. Like, I don't know how the words are. I don't know the language to express all of this that's happening inside or what I'm learning. But, like, how do you go to therapy and hold on to now time, and also hold, like, monkey bars or something, like, hold on to now time with one hand, and with another hand hold on to another part who needs help getting out of memory time, or who needs to talk about what happened in memory time, but without losing now time. Does that make sense? Like, I'm not sure I'm even still saying it yet, but she talked about it and she knew what she was talking about, and it seemed important, so I wrote it down. I don't know how to say it, and I don't know how to do it, but I want to help. But what she said was that the reason it's hard to do is because of dissociation, and that what dissociation basically is like a self-phobia. Like, I'm so afraid of myself, I cannot be myself. But I guess, I'm sorry, that's just funny. I'm so afraid of myself, I cannot be myself. I'm sorry, it's funny because it's true. So she's saying that it's not just that the trauma is so hard and awful. And it's not just that the trauma happened for so long of a time, but it's also that it's awful that that trauma happened like to me. Except it didn't happen to me because I have a self phobia. So she said the other thing is that a self phobia is really actually a trauma phobia. That we're afraid of knowing other parts, we're afraid of knowing their stories, and we're afraid of losing functioning if we do. So I think that about sums us up, and we're done here. So since she has figured out all that, we can just go. Like, we're done. She's figured it out. We're good. We don't have to go to therapy anymore. I'm just kidding. So then she talked about all the different ways that that looks and all of that. And Dr. E can talk about that because I don't get it. But self-phobia cracked me up, and I'm totally going to use it in sentences from now on. Because self-phobia is really a trauma phobia, which is totally true. Who's not scared of trauma? Trauma's awful. I don't even want to know. So now there's a word for not wanting to know, and it's not just denial, it is self-phobia, which is trauma phobia. So I can just stay out of it. But if I stay out of it, then I can't be the cool one who steps up in therapy and tries to help other people. Whatever. So anyway, then she told a story about her own 3-year-old grandchild or something. And she said the cool thing about having grandchildren is that you can watch them without having to actually be the parent who's involved with either helping them or messing them up. Everybody laughed when she said that. But what she said is a 3-year-old is not actually all needy all the time. So when a 3-year-old from inside is trying to get help in therapy, that it's more trauma-based and not just needy, but the adult parts interpret it as needy because they don't know how to meet those needs because those needs were never met. But the therapist knows how to meet those needs, so you have to trust your therapist. I hate when they're right. But she said the other thing she said was that 3-year-olds aren't just needy all the time. They're really good at running off and doing their own thing and exploring the world, and that's part of what they do. And so part of healthy therapy is letting them do that. So it's not just meeting the needs of that 3-year-old, but learning those same skills as an adult. So she's like, if you get some blocks or toys or something for your littles, then that's a good thing because you're paying attention to them. That part of you knows that they can connect and they start to build safety and all those kinds of things. And there's a whole stuff about that. And I can't even talk about that right now. But she said it's also important that you do those same things for yourself. That the adult parts, whatever they're learning with the littles, they learn from the littles. It's not just that you rescue the littles and that the littles get all the help, but that you learn from the littles what you also need. So, if the littles need books and toys, for example, then what do you need that are your books and toys? Dr. E needs nerdy books that bore me, but what are toys I can play with? But what is it that's play for me? And so as an adult. So when we take our outside kids to the park, they feel better and have fun and they play, but so do we. And not just with the littles, but because we get exercise, because we're out in the sunshine and that's good for our mood, things like that. So she was talking about how even when you're just working with a part, your therapist is helping your littles or something like that, that it's still good for the whole system because the parts are always part of the whole. Mind blown. So again, it stretched my brain when I zoomed in and tried to pay attention. It stretched my brain so much and made my brain hurt, but maybe I could almost get a grasp on it and then it was gone. But trying to write down pieces and talking about them, I thought might help a little bit. So then the next piece of stuff that she talked about was shame, which she said was acting in instead of acting out. So that's what the husband is always talking about, is how M struggles with stuff internally and we struggle with stuff externally or something like that. I think that's what he meant. She's acting in because of shame instead of acting out like me and my mouth or whatever. So she said that trauma survivors are really good at catastrophizing. Because things have always been so bad, and when things were bad, it was really bad, that we think if we make changes now, even if they're positive changes, we won't be able to go back and use the same skills that we could before. or that we'll be trapped without parts or a therapist to help us, or that if people think we are able to do stuff or function better, then we'll have to even when we can't, or that people will think we're okay when we're not. So she said those are like reasons that shame comes in and can slow down progress or therapy when otherwise we would be doing really well. But she said shame is a human emotion and everyone feels it, and you can learn to manage it just like fear or other emotions. So she said you could even like literally tell yourself, I'm having a shame attack, instead of just this shame means I am bad, which is pretty much how M lives in the world. So I'm not trying to talk bad about her. I'm just talking about shame. But she said shame shows up in the body and thoughts and feelings. And here's the kicker. This is what I wanted to tell you about. She said that shame has triggers just like trauma has triggers. So our therapist has taught us about triggers and what triggers means, like that word. It's like when something, let me see if I can say it right. A trigger is when something in now time makes you think of something from memory time, or even feels like something in memory time, or even makes you think you're in memory time. But really, you're in now time where the trigger happened. You're not really back then. Back then is over. But shame works the same way, this lady said. And so the good thing, like finding the good in the bad therapy experiences, you can find the good in the shame. Not that shame is good, not that you want shame, but you can use it. So just like with trauma triggers, you can anticipate it, you can recognize it, and you can cope with it. But bam. Except I don't know how to do that. She just said it was possible. So that was like our whole entire morning, okay? And my brain hurts. There's pieces I'm trying to hold on to and things I think like, maybe I could help with this. And I even felt a couple times like my feelings were excited of like, okay, there's some hope here. I have words for things I didn't have words before, except zoom in, zoom out. I don't have words for that yet. I don't know what that's called. And there are like ways to make things better, I guess. Maybe, I'm not sure. But that's what she said. So, we'll see. So then the next thing that I learned that I want to tell you about is how she connected. This was Kathy Steele, by the way. I didn't even tell you that because I'm so scattered. Like, this stuff was crazy. Crazy helpful. That's what I meant. I'm working on not being offensive. So I'm probably not supposed to say crazy, but shoulda, coulda, woulda. Okay, so the other thing I wanted to share that she talked about is more about that shame stuff. So, like, you know how guilt, even if it's false guilt, like you feel bad about something you did, right? Or didn't do. But shame, you feel bad about who you are, right? So this is something we've learned since group and have talked about in several different interviews. So I've learned about it from the podcast. But she talked about it. So she said when you have a need and your needs are not met, then that's what leads to shame. And that goes back to all the attunement stuff. You need to watch the still face experiment on YouTube if you were never in psych class or if you never got to see it, because it totally shows all this misattunement stuff. But when your needs are not met, then like connection is ruptured, like connection in your relationships, right? And shame leads to rage. And I was like, what? Because I'm not a rageful person. Like, I only talk on the podcast. I don't talk to people. I don't talk to people inside. I don't talk to the therapist. So if I don't even talk to them, how can I rage at them? But you know what she said? Then she like totally defined rage as either attacking yourself or attacking others. So back up for a minute. What? She said when you withdraw from others, that looks like isolation, like social anxiety. Check. Yeah, working really hard on the friendship stuff, by the way. Like, really hard. I'm really terrible at it. I need a therapy session that's like just how to be a friend. Because I'm a terrible friend. So we got check marked on that one. Or this may also be a problem, perhaps. I'm not saying, I'm not confessing, I'm not admitting to anything, but it's possible that this is also true. She said it can also look like you're pretending to be extroverted and that you have lots of people around you, but it's all superficial and you don't actually go like any deep with them. I need some depth. I need some. I need. Why is it so hard? People. Okay, so I totally got marked on that. So she said you heal that by participating and also by deepening your friendships. And then the other thing was, she said you can also withdraw from your internal world, like denying it, oopsie, and not communicating with each other, or more shame stuff even inside. And so the way you heal that is by facing it, like listening to each other and looking at the stuff that there is, talking, listening, writing, however like that can happen. And then also building trust with each other. So, hard stuff. But then when she was talking about the shame and about rage and how that looks like attacking yourself or attacking others, she said that severely neglected children cannot use imagery. So they were talking about EMDR stuff. We are not an EMDR therapist. Dr. E does not do EMDR. We are not EMDR haters. Just like we don't treat trauma and we don't treat issues EMDR is helpful with, so we never did that. So I don't know about all that, but she did some kind of like imagery thing, and that was all kinds of crazy for us. So I don't know, but what she said was you can't use it with severely neglected children or adults who were severely neglected children when they are unable to use imagery. And so she said those people are people who are super extroverted, aggressive, and they overshare, and that it's because their frontal cortex is inhibited. I know nothing about the frontal cortex, guys. I can barely say those words. So Dr. E will have to explain all that. But she said their symptoms show up as like impaired decision making. On the other hand, the other way severely neglected children respond as they grow up are becoming extremely sensitive to imagery. And so like symbols, a high hypnotic suggestibility, also can't say that. Things like EMDR are really helpful, and guided adapted meditations. Like, I don't know, like this is pretty vulnerable. Like I don't know exactly all the words for it or labels of it, but this is like what our therapist is really good at also, because she takes care of us this way. But she said that those people grow up to be artistic and introverted, undershare until they become an adult and start a podcast, and have like impaired verbal direct expression, which means you do a podcast instead of actually talking to your therapist, and you interview your friend instead of actually being a friend. That is indirect communication. So she said it's because, though, like it's a thing. Like we're not just being naughty. She said it's an inhibited Broca's area something in the brain. Severely neglected children, so not just abused children, but specifically severely neglected children, get impacted two different ways, and based on what part of the brain is impacted and why, it shows up in these two different ways. So that was like fascinating, if you have glasses. But then there was one more thing that I want to share about what we learned at this thing today. She talked about feelings are also triggers. So trauma triggers, shame triggers, but also feeling triggers. That like you can spaz out because of specific feelings, or because of why you're feeling, or because of trying to express your feelings, or, and this was huge, you guys, huge, also because of animal defenses. And I was like, what? Because I'm not an animal, so I got very confused on this part. But she meant like biologically, physiologically, like what your body does is like a natural organic response, not just a choice. So like When there is a predator, your body and your brain respond a certain way, just like everyone else in the animal kingdom. I am not making this up. This is what this lady told us. And so she said it's not a conscious choice. Like physiologically, your body shuts down. You have no choice externally because there's a predator, like the abusers, right? And you have no choice internally because you can't get away. So when you have thoughts like, why didn't I fight back? Or why couldn't I get away? Or things like that that are really shame-based questions, the answer is because you couldn't. And it's not your fault. And logic does not actually help with shame-based issues. But, like, that's a really helpful thing to know when you're in a good place to have some knowing and to think about things. Like she said, you literally couldn't. You couldn't get away outside and you couldn't get away inside. And that's why dissociating happens. I don't know. I'm going to have to think about it. But the important piece seems to be that it's not your fault. And I don't know how many times we can say that. It's not your fault. It's not your fault. It's not your fault. Like, we'll keep saying, it's not your fault. And I'll keep saying it. And maybe I can remember, it's not my fault. It's not my fault. Except I don't know how to tell, like, how do you tell M that? Or how do you tell the littles that? Like, that's why I need to be participating in therapy. Because when I get a piece like that, it feels really big and it feels really important, but I don't know where it goes. So I have to go back to direct communication and talk to my therapist and talk to others inside and tell them what I learned. That not only is it not your fault, like, oh, they were bigger than you, or they were meaner than you, or they this, or they that, or whatever, like stuff I don't want to talk about right now, but like literally, she talked like this whole thing, like it was really triggering actually. I think we got a little spacey. Like, she talked about this whole thing about how it works in the body, that your body physically shuts down when you're being attacked. Like, it's not even a time of flight or freeze or fright or something. Yeah, it is a fright. That's not right. Flight or fright. No, wait. What is it? Fight. Fight or flight. Like, not just that moment, but like once it's already happening, it's already too late for that, and you cannot respond. Like, your body just shuts down. And she explained how all that happens in the brain, and I don't understand it enough to tell you. But the point is, it happens in the animal kingdom and with prey and predators and all of that, of like your body just shuts down and there's nothing you can do about it in that moment when you're a child. And so, like, it's not your fault you couldn't get away, and it's not your fault you couldn't fight back. Like, there's supposed to be some compassion there and understanding that and communicating that, and that's why we should go to therapy. So, just putting that out there on the pro list for therapy. We have a whole other day of this tomorrow, so we'll share more if we learn anything, and then Dr. E will do like a legit review of what we learned, and she's presenting for the Plural Conference. And so those of you who want the Nerd Town stuff, you can get that then. I'm just telling you, this is what made me crazy, and why there was all this stuff going on about zooming in and zooming out. I need to know what the word is at. So if you're listening to this podcast and know an actual word for this whole zoom in, zoom out thing, you should let me know. Or else we can just call it zoom in, zoom out from now on, because I don't know how to explain it, but I'm learning stuff and it feels important. So I'm trying to keep it up in my head. Thanks for listening.
Thank you for joining us with System Speak, a podcast about dissociative identity disorder. You can listen to the podcast on Spotify, Google Play, and iTunes, or follow along on our website, www.systemspeak.org. Thanks for listening.
This shape is pissing me off because... Okay, finally. Because I know that it's usually supposed to be right at the door, and it's not. It's way far away. I don't know why. There's no way to recall it like there is on floor 20. But hey, I somehow got through the door there. Alright, I'll listen to the next one, and then I'll probably listen to Skitter's playlist. Gravy.
This is Dr. E, and I have shared before about some of what we're learning regarding shame, and I wanted to share what we learned at a conference yesterday about shame and some of the things that she shared. The speaker was Kathy Steele, who is very well known for traveling to different dissociation conferences all over the world and as part of ISSTD and presenting about dissociation and trauma. She subscribes to this secondary, tertiary dissociation model where there's dissociating at the trauma responsive level, and then there's also the dissociating among different parts. So rather than using A and P for apparently normal parts, she uses DL, meaning daily living part. So for example, I would be considered one of those when I'm doing my daily job. She also does not use EP as a term for parts, but rather TF for trauma fixated for other parts such as littles. However, she also doesn't think that you should necessarily work with parts directly, but rather only the DL, or the daily living part, as an adult self. My concern with that is that the DL, as she calls it, who's presenting in therapy, is likely not who she is assuming that person is to be. If there is a structural dissociation theory, then that part that she's calling a DL, kind of in a reference to the old school version of a core or a main part, that one is just an alter as well. And so I have some concerns, and I'm not really sure that I entirely agree or understand with her approach on that. But I'll be talking about that at the Plural Positivity Conference that's coming up in March. For today, I just want to share about the shame pieces that she taught and how that fits or doesn't fit with some of the things that I have learned before. So to start with, she shared some history, which we know that in 1987, research showed that shame is already present as a primary emotion at birth. And then it comes online fully during the second year of life, which is part of why there are so many tantrums with 2 and 3-year-olds. Part of that is also their independence, but you see the shame come in as they are differentiating when they are struggling with new tasks and have some frustration tolerance that they're building, but also the emotional response to not being able to do what they want to do and not being able to do everything that older siblings can or that their parents can. And so they are learning then the difference between guilt for when they do something wrong, like being told no, and shame for being not enough, meaning not able to do what other people can do, or also confusing being told no with being told that they're bad. So these are lessons that happen very early in life, both internally and externally. The other thing that we know about shame is that it's not just one feeling. It's a composite of feelings such as fear and disgust, and sometimes guilt, true or not, or false guilt could be part of it. I think in this way, I've not heard this presented or seen it in research, but I believe that in this context, it also has to do with just a level of discernment and part of object relations between what is the difference between you and me, what is the difference between good and bad, how do I hold both, how can I do something wrong but still be good. And so I think there's a lot more research that will be unfolding as the trend continues to study shame and its impact, especially on trauma survivors. Shame is also one of the self-conscious emotions, meaning it's something that you're aware of and something that makes you think about who you are and who you're not. So it's one that's reflected on. So with trauma survivors, when there's cognitively some rumination happening anyway, then this is part of how shame gets reinforced as an internal dialogue. Further, shame is also an auxiliary emotion that inhibits positive emotions. So Kathy Steele gave the example of a client who has severe shame issues but had done something really well in school and was telling her a story about being really proud of herself for doing well on this paper or an exam or something. And her affect was bright. She was animated and energetic, and she told this story, and then as soon as she finished telling the story, she just completely shut down and slumped, and her head turned down, her affect was flat. And it's because she had this shame dialogue that was so intense that told her, even when she had done something well, that something was still not good enough, or that this was going to be taken from her in some way. And so even though it was a positive experience, the neurocircuitry in her brain was so hardwired towards shame that she immediately felt bad because she had done something good. It wasn't just that she had done a lot of things wrong. It was that she had done something well, but then had been proud of herself, and that triggered danger signals in her brain. And so you can see in the neurocircuitry, which I will also talk about at the conference, how the brain adapts. And when these signals get reinforced and these neural pathways get reinforced, then they almost trigger themselves, even when the circumstances and environment are now positive and good. This is one reason that therapy is so necessary for these issues, because as our system says, now time is safe. But if your brain doesn't know that, you can't do the other work to hold on to it, or other work to work on past issues, because it's not differentiated. So it's really important, for example, that our therapist is working on now time is safe from the very beginning and first, before we've done anything else. There are different ways that shame shows up, such as feeling inadequate or incompetent, such as needing help, a lack of perfection, feeling broken or damaged. And again, some of these things may initially appear as false guilt. You don't need to feel bad because other people abused you, and yet all of us do. And so that's an example of feeling shame because there was badness, even though the badness wasn't yours. Also, when you are a trauma survivor, it is hard to ask for help because help either didn't come, or had strings attached, or became an opportunity for punishment. And in addition to that, there's the experience of your needs not actually ever being met. And so this goes back to what Patricia DeYoung shares about shame being related to feeling bad for who you are and that you had needs, rather than needs being a healthy and normal and appropriate part of development at any age, or in even any new skill. It also goes back to the still face experiment, which you can see on YouTube if you don't know the video, where the baby works so hard to match the expression of the mother just to have some attunement and to meet that need of connection. So the drive for connection is so deep that it will be matched in negative or poor ways, even if that's not the initial need that the child or person has. So one thing that I encourage survivors to do is to surround themselves with things that are good and positive, not in a fake Pollyanna way, but in a way that models some of those nurturing needs, even if that was not your parent or your primary caregiver. You can do this through books or through movies or through finding role models or mentors or positive people who can encourage and strengthen you and provide some of that attunement even before you get to a good therapist or before you are able to do your own trauma work. I know that doesn't solve everything, but it provides some attunement needs and can shape some of your perspective in sort of a holding pattern until you're able to engage in the therapeutic process. We can also feel ashamed for feeling unlovable or unacceptable, and that includes body shame. And again, this has to do with the history of trauma survivors for sure. We can also feel ashamed of our loss of dignity, and that goes back to abuse issues such as humiliation, objectification, degradation, or dehumanization. It's no wonder that you feel badly about your body or who you are, or even existing sometimes when you've been through the things that you've been through. You can also be ashamed of your inner experience, such as emotions, thoughts, or sensations. So I know when I was initially diagnosed when I was in college, I had already been in therapy for 2 years and had no memory of it. And I was deeply ashamed of this and deeply ashamed of my behavior and my interactions and my choices when I was not the one out front. I didn't have the words for being out front or fronting. I didn't have the words for what happened when I lost time, or even the phrase lost time. I didn't have those words yet, but I had deep feelings for shame about these issues. Further, as I continued it through grad school, I had deep shame that I had such trauma issues and felt it very difficult to claim them as my own because I only knew about them through that therapist that diagnosed me. I had no recollection of them, and I had no recollection of the others or any contact with them. And the more that I built up those walls, the less in touch with myself I became. And it wasn't even until that interview that I did with Susan Peace Bannett that I was ever even able to out myself, for lack of better words, as DID in a professional setting, even though that was still just the context of the podcast. For me, it was a really big deal. So sometimes that shame is eased or healed even when it's just brought to the surface in those ways. We can also feel ashamed of our behaviors, such as substance abuse or sex addictions or other issues that are behavioral and related to our past or are associated in some way with trauma, even if we don't fully understand it. So, for example, I know that we collectively are super sensitive about having our picture taken or being in videos. And I know now, not the full details of, or the story of, or the experience of, but finally, because of reading the notebooks for therapy, I know pieces of why that might be possible and what brought that on. But that feels really distant from me and not at all connected to any experience that I have any direct recollection of. And so what I only feel is the shame of I don't want to be in pictures, even professionally. It's very difficult to me. I've had different scenarios where I had to provide a professional photo for work or for presenting somewhere or doing radio interviews or being on television or different things. And it was very difficult for me and very uncomfortable for me. And I only felt the shame for that behavior, that such a simple thing was so hard for me. And that shame was there long before I had any context for why that might be. We can also be ashamed of uncontrollable and overwhelming experiences, such as poverty or trauma. We actually learned a lot about poverty during the years that our youngest child was in the hospital for several years after she was born. I had always been very careful with my money, and I regulate the money for our system, meaning I give everyone an allowance and we are careful with how we spend our money and manage it, have come to learn how to manage it in that way. So I'm really good at budgeting and really careful with money. But when both of our parents died very close together and we had to pay to bury them and all the final expenses, there was no one else to pay for that, and they had no arrangements made for that. And covering that used up all of my savings, even like my 401k that I had built thus far as a young adult. So in some ways, I was grateful because I had that money to do it. Like we were able to take care of it because I had that money, and that's kind of the kind of emergency that a 401k or those things are for. But at the same time, I was really frustrated, and I don't know that I've ever spoken about this directly, but I was also really frustrated because I had very little relationship with the parents, very little memory of the parents. And so to me, it was, for lack of better words, like a nail on the coffin of those relationships, that they had this one final way, even though we were not in contact, they had this one final way to just take what I had from me. So there's shame in that memory and some anger, I think, there that I don't know where it is or how it shows up or where it's going, but I can sense it and I'm aware of it. And that's maybe the closest emotional response to any of my history that I'm aware of. But because of that experience, that used up all of my financial resources as a young adult. So when we then got cancer the year after that, and then had this child born that had medical problems the year after that, we were starting at zero. We had no reserves to rely on during those times. and it created a lot of crisis just because of poverty. And there are things about poverty in America that I learned through that experience that I had no idea was part of our society or culture. It is very expensive to be poor. You have to pay higher fines and extra fees when you are poor.
Okay, sorry. Wait, why is my face stuck on surprise? It's been this way this whole time, hasn't it? When did that happen? Oh, because during the last time I got hit, I was editing the title for a video and I typed 6. Anyway, sorry about my shocked face for so long. I guess it is appropriate. Anyway, I'm gonna go to the bathroom. I'll be right back. Back. Okay. Can I also acknowledge how crazy it is that I'm on floor 48 again? Like, we're really almost there. For real this time, maybe. Laugh track. What if we could replace the laugh tracks with the gesture laugh? I think it would be great. Like a Seinfeld episode with the gesture as the laugh track. Anyway.
You have fewer choices when you are poor. It's exponential, and it's a very difficult thing to crawl out of. And we ultimately even sold our house to pay for the medical bills for our youngest child. So doing that, we were able to recover, but again, started us out at zero. And this is not even a situation where we had done something wrong. There's so much stigma with poverty. I could do another podcast just on that. There's so much stigma with poverty about people who are not trying hard enough or not working hard enough or just wanting to abuse the system. It's really, really difficult, actually. Like, there were some places that would say they would provide help or assistance with this and this and this, but only if you fit this category, or only if you had already tried this, or only if that. Like, I remember one time the bishop from our church telling us to go to this community agency because they would help pay our utilities for 1 month. And we went to that agency, which was a whole other shame issue of having to go ask for help in that way. And then when we got there, they would only cover us if we had already received either an eviction notice or foreclosure notice. And if we were being evicted or foreclosed on, we would not need help with the utilities. Like, we wouldn't be there. And so it's just been very, very difficult to fight this system in that way and to crawl out of that oppression. And we learned so much about the shame in that, even though nothing happened to us. Like, we did nothing wrong. The husband worked 2 jobs all of those years. We worked 2 or 3 jobs, sometimes literally for 20-hour days or more when we worked at the hospital, so that we had done nothing wrong to find ourselves in the thralls of poverty. The only thing that happened to cause us to be in this world of poverty was that our parents died, our body got cancer, and our child was born with an airway problem. That's all that happened. None of that was about anything we did wrong, but there was so much shame and so much stigma about poverty and trying to ask for help and trying to find resources for help. It was really difficult. And so it's become something very important to us now to minister, for lack of a better word, to others, not necessarily that are just in poverty, but that can prevent some of those things happening. If people are kind and generous before there's a crisis, before a family is in crisis or a mother is in crisis, you can prevent some of those things that happen. If someone had just helped us in the beginning, or some of those agencies or friends who later said, oh, I didn't realize things were so bad, here's this, or let me help with that. If they had helped with those tiny, tiny ways at the beginning, things would not have escalated the way that they did. So now when there's an opportunity to share or to serve in ways that we're able to do now that we could not do before, even if it's just in small ways, that's really important to us, because I think it makes a bigger difference than you realize. If you can educate women, if you can support women, if you can provide families with things that they need, especially when they're working so hard to do all that they can do, then that's worth it, and it makes a difference, and it rescues families. And that's an example of fighting shame and empowering people instead of shaming people. So that's just a big issue that we learned about that we had no idea was even out there until we experienced it. So maybe that's, as far as finding meaning or meaning making, that may be one reason we had to experience some of those hard years so that we would know how to advocate for other people. We can also be ashamed of someone or something else, such as family or political policy. I have said enough about poverty. I cannot even start talking about politics right now, but definitely there can be a shame. But even if we're looking at the clinical world and the world of therapists right now, a political example would be the shame over some therapists dismissing other therapists who work with dissociative disorders, or a clinical community dismissing therapists who also have DID themselves, or different issues or different camps of how to treat DID. This camp says you should treat it this way, and another camp says you should treat it this way. This is happening with the ISD-11 and complex PTSD, which will come out as an official diagnosis with the ICD-11, because one group of people says you do not need to do the stabilization phase of therapy. You guys just want to make more money, and you're oppressing clients by making more money off of them. And the other camp says, no, part of healing is the stabilization skills. You do need that phase. You guys just don't want to do it because you want to make money off of this quick model that you say you've developed, but really is the same thing as this, just really fast. So even politics among healers divides us instead of empowering us. The same thing happens within the community. When we have different systems acting out internal conflicts with each other in the DID community, it's divisive and it's drama instead of empowering each other and supporting each other. Everyone has been through enough, and we need to heal together and support each other rather than fighting each other. The other thing about shame is that it does actually have a social function. That social function is not always positive. So in the example I was just giving in the DID community, you can't have one system calling out another system for things they did wrong, or trying to expose who they are in real life. Things like that are attempts to establish power over another, and that's just not okay. Shame helps us learn and keep the boundaries of socially acceptable behavior so that we can be part of our group. So this is true whether we're talking about internal systems, whether we're talking about intra-system, like between systems externally, or whether we're talking about a community inside, or a family, or an outside community, or the DID community as a whole, or even a town or a city. Like any dynamic that you're applying to this systems approach, what it really is guilt that we should feel bad when we do things wrong. That's true. That's part of what keeps us from repeating those behaviors or violations of whatever code or moral law that you're referring to or working under. Those boundaries also provide a way for a group or a community to have an optimal level of closeness, but also distance. So within a system, you may have rules of engagement, so to speak, of we can all work together and everyone gets a vote and we can discuss things as a group. But part of that is agreeing as a group that we're not going to hurt the body or that we're not going to go do X, Y, or Z because it's not good for us. And that may look different among different systems. It's the same as different cities have different codes or laws in the city regulations, or different states have different rules, or different countries have different rules and laws. But the difference is that chronic shame no longer serves a social purpose, creating chronic disconnection and profound inner anguish, which is not the same as setting healthy boundaries and feeling bad when you cross them. This is, again, rather than guilt for doing something wrong that you did, this is shame for who you are, which is not healthy or functional. It creates disconnect, whether that's internally or externally with other people, and it is stressful. And I love that word anguish that she used, the inner anguish. That's so true. Historically, shame is a primary affect associated with the innate motivational system concerned with social ranking. It has to do with dominance and submission in the animal kingdom. And it's one reason why it's such a violation from abusers to survivors, because for something to be abuse, because it automatically involves a misuse of power, and a child is already in a submissive state. I don't mean submissive as in obedient or oppressed, but already when there's abuse of a child, there is already an imbalance between age and understanding and capacity and power and physical strength and physical size and all of these things that already put the child in a submissive state compared to the power dominance when we're talking about the dynamics between the abuser and the survivor. Shame, as part of this, creates a hypo-aroused state of submission. And there's a higher order of cognitive experience that involves feeling less than or lower than. So this imbalance of power is always part of abuse. This is an important piece to remember when we're talking also about organizational abuse or any kind of ritual abuse. But it's still a thread with any kind of abuse at all. Shame is also an inhibitor. It can serve to inhibit positive emotions like joy, interest, or connection with others. That's why shame is one reason it's really hard to ask for help in the first place. And then even with our therapists, for example, when they go to therapy, I will hear them talk all the way there or all week long between sessions about all the things that they want to tell the therapist and how much they miss the therapist and what they're going to do in therapy. But then when we get there, no one can talk. They don't, it's really hard for them to talk. So this is part of what makes it hard to open up. Again, when you're talking about healthy boundaries, part of the social function of shame serves to protect. And so, for example, that helps you not open up to just everyone, or even not tell every therapist everything until you know which therapist is really able to help you, or until you have a safe place with a safe therapist to go ahead and open up and start sharing. And even when we're talking about plural positivity, there may be some people that it's actually not safe or appropriate for you to tell about DID. There may be some people that you have in your life that are safe and appropriate. You can tell them. So shame doesn't always have to control you or be oppressive in some way. It sometimes can help you be wise and careful with what you share with whom and help in some boundaries. It can also serve as a defense against other negative emotions such as anger, grief, or disappointment. So when some of these harder emotions come up, if you're already more familiar with shame, it may be easier to default to shame and to feel shame rather than feeling some of these more complicated feelings. And then when there are some things that you should feel shame about but you don't, then it's kind of important to look at that red flag as far as what piece of the experience you may be dissociating from. A research study in 2014 talked about how the child abuse is a major risk factor for shame.
Hang on.
And we also know that shame is a mediator between child abuse and adult psychopathology.
Man, there's still over half an hour of this this episode. I did not expect to get here this quick. I'm gonna turn the music in the game back on to like fully take in the cutscene and the next part of the tower. I cannot believe I made it to the top. I mean, technically it's not over yet, but I can't even process it right now. I'm almost trying not to get my hopes up. Where is the music? I turned it back up. Maybe it just doesn't play on 450? Here, it's back. Honestly, I'm laughing, but actually I'm annoyed. You weren't supposed to get up here. I've got nothing up my sleeves. I don't even have arms. Psych! I do have arms. But you can't outrun this bomb. I gotta climb back down before this explodes now, huh? Yep. Ugh. Honestly, I expected a bit more of a reaction. Oh, I love the song here. I cannot believe it. It didn't even feel that hard today. It was chill. I only had to wait for the fairy like twice. Like, it's just like the more you do it, the easier it gets, and then when you finally beat it, it's like, oh, that wasn't so bad. But but I would never think that I would have that reaction. Oh. So that was a hit. It was red, not blue. So hopefully I don't get hit again, but I do have the flag in case I do. Probably make it, right? Fall faster, Beebs. Okay. Ah! I forgot to leave myself. Am I an idiot? Yeah. You have bested the tower. Be proud. Yes. I can't believe it. Feels so good. You call that tower a challenge? Can I interact with NPCs or whatever? Oh, do I get added to this automatically? Wait. Oh, it's timing based, right? Oh, Skitter the Critter! I forgot that was my Steam name. Oh, well, I'm assuming when you choose the Steam name, it changes. It's not really a big deal, but for the record, I beat it, not Skitter. The Jester has been defeated, I hear. Yep. Want me to get you out? I'm afraid I've gotten used to this abode, little voice. Okay. Perhaps being down here has led me to further embrace my own agoraphobia. So, I just leave you here then? Yes, little voice. But I thank you for dealing with the Jester nonetheless. Perhaps someday we'll be able to become friends once more. Well, I doubt that. Then again, you both are now closer to each other than you think. Literally. Goodbye, little voice. Goodbye, weird hand dude. Oh. What? What's this coin thing? Oh. Oh, Midgie. I was trying to find you. You did it, yo! You've got your powers and beat the Jester. Guy kinda beat himself, to be honest. Beebsy, I cannot believe you managed to scale that tower. I shouldn't be surprised every time you say you'll do something, you just do it. But color me surprised anyway. What's this say? Short jump, full jump, second triple jump, side jump, third double jump, first double jump, second double jump. Sorry, I'm just like looking around in case there's anyone else who wants to congratulate me. That's probably it. Is there any dialogue that happens if I go back in? No, it just gives you another chance to do it. Okay. I still can't believe we made it. uh, uh, I'm so happy about that. Well, I guess that's the end of these recordings. We finally did it, y'all. Woo!